In efforts to curb sexual offences in the country, the Nigerian federal government launches the first national sexual offenders registry.
Running one of the few women-owned diamond polishing businesses in the world makes these two sisters as rare as gems. We'll learn how they keep their business sparkling despite the slumping global market for diamonds.
See how Nigeria is using the creative arts to help those suffering from chronic illnesses. Africa 54 starts right now.
Hello and welcome to Africa 54. I'm Joker Rogers at Channels Television here in Lagos, and I'm joined by my colleague at the Voice of America in Washington.
Well, thanks a lot. I'm Vincent McCoy at our global headquarters in Washington, D.C. Happy to be with you again for another edition of Africa 54. Let's start off with a look at the launch of Nigeria's Sexual Offence Registry. Joker Rogers in Lagos brings you that story.
That's right. The federal government of Nigeria has launched the first National Sexual Offenders Register. The register, which will contain the names and pictures of convicted persons, is part of efforts to curb sexual offences in the country. Speaking at the unveiling, the United Nations Deputy Secretary General, Mrs. Amina Mohammed, insists that the register will ensure proper reporting of cases of sexual abuse and prosecution of offenders.
As we launch the Sex Offenders Register, we'll bring an end to rape in Nigeria and the world at large. Thank you.
The launch of the register marks the beginning of the global 16-day campaign calling for the eradication of gender-based violence. Aside this launch, only 2 states have launched the sexual offender register. They are Lagos and Ekiti. According to UNICEF, 1 in 4 girls in Nigeria have experienced sexual violence by the age of 18 and hardly receive any form of support. The register is documentation of reported, tried or convicted cases of sexual violations and gender-based violence to name and shame those prosecuted for the abuse in order to deter potential offenders.
All those rapists, pedophiles, people who think they can rape and get away with rape, they are going to put them in the register. The register will be made available to everybody. Their faces, their names, their aliases, whatever they call themselves, are going to be up there for the whole world to see.
In the 2019 report of the National Bureau of Statistics, violence against women had been on the increase from 2015 to 2017, as the percentage of rape incidents for girls was 63.04% in 2015, which increased to 72.13% in 2016, but decreased to 69.3% in 2017.
In order to end rape and other forms of gender-based violence, we must invest in prevention by addressing the root causes of the problem. Given that gender-based violence is rooted in gender-based power inequalities and regressive gender norms, we must focus on transforming those gender relations and social norms.
The 2019 commemoration theme, Orange the Wall, Generation Equality Stands Against Rape, is very apt, and it speaks to issues of rape, which is assuming an alarming and unacceptable dimension in our society.
The idea of the register is to ensure the application of stiffer sanctions against sex offenders. The record is expected to be available online to allow transparency with members of the public and to help state bodies, security agencies, and other stakeholders conduct background checks and identify repeat offenders.
And here to talk about stepping up efforts to end human rights violations in Nigeria is Ambassador Ketil Carlson, the European Union Ambassador to Nigeria and ECOWAS. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
So we're in the middle of the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, which is being marked all over the world, I must say. This year's event is very significant for Nigeria because of the launch of the Sexual Offences Register, joining a handful of countries that have done so. What are your expectations following this achievement?
So I think this year we are really walking the talk, or converting words into action, because seeing a national register for sexual offenders can potentially make a big difference. And I think, as you said, it's vital to recognize that challenges around sexual violence against women and girls, and to a certain extent also boys, is something that we see throughout the world. But in Nigeria, there are some very significant challenges as well. So I commend our partners from Nigeria, the civil society, our partners that have helped to get this very important result. That this can potentially make a real big difference, because it could have a very big preventive effect as well.
So gender-based violence is really but one form of rights violation that women in many parts of the world face. Let's look at other women's rights issues, such as denial of resources, poor access to basic services, low political participation, to mention a few. How do these sort of infractions affect inclusive growth in the country?
Well, I mean, so at some point somebody said very wisely that you cannot win a match when you have half of the team sitting on the bench. And another person said that women's rights are human rights. And this may seem like stating the obvious, but in reality, quite often it is not like that at all. So I think looking at Nigeria, there is definitely scope for improvement in terms of bringing women on board in decision-making processes, having women participating more in the economy, and as I said before, seeing the fight against gender-based violence in general and sexual gender-based violence in particular taking place. Now, there's some sort of a dilemma in Nigeria in the sense that, of everywhere I've been, and I worked throughout the world, I have rarely, if ever, seen as dynamic, as capable, as entrepreneurial women as in Nigeria. Unfortunately, we see some very significant and positive stories as well of women coming forward and, contributing and prevailing. But quite often, we also see women being put in the background. Now, of course, the recent elections in Nigeria may be a case in point, and as you will recall, the observation mission that the European Union had here pointed out to the fact that, fewer and fewer women seem to be elected into political office. So we believe that it's quite vital that the women are given a voice also in decision making. So there's a long way to go. And of course, there are many human rights, and all are extremely important, and we should be very careful not to rank the importance of one over the other, but truly making sure that women's rights are put at the very top of our priority list must be a vital thing to do. And that is why, as the European Union as well, during these 16 days of activism against gender-based violence and building up to the Human Rights Day that we will have on the 10th of December, we are giving this top priority. And we are involving all our partners, of course, working with our national partners at federal level, at state level, at local level, but also the civil society.
So how is the partnership between the European Union and the Nigerian authorities impacting mechanisms to strengthen human rights protection?
So we work very closely with our Nigerian partners, and I'm a strong believer, and so is my institution, that you cannot sort of import ways of doing things from Europe or other places. We need to support Nigerian-led policies, Nigerian-led visions, and Nigerian institutions, as a matter of fact, because that's the only way to have a sustainable approach. And that's what we are doing here also. And that is why we are working with so many partners in government, on the National Registry, with NAPTIP, with the National Police. We are working with the Human Rights Commission. We are working with the entire justice system. Of course, we are engaging with the military as well, providing information on human rights to the security agencies and a number of other institutions. And I think the only way that we can fundamentally make sure that these challenges are met, that we all grab the bulls by the horns, if you wish, is to make sure to consistently promote the strengthening of democratic institutions to cater for these very important matters. Because by the end of the day, this is the very gist, the very essence of democracy, is providing fundamental basic services for the citizens of our countries. And one of the most important rights, of course, is the human rights.
Right, thank you so much for your thoughts today, Ambassador Ketil Carlson. Thank you for joining us today on Africa 54.
Well, we're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered. Join the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also, check our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come, see how the chef in Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso's capital, is blazing the trail in the manufacture of homemade chocolate.